Good day, everyone, and thank you for attending today's episode of Presidio's C-Suite Perspectives, where we speak with technology leaders about management, culture, team building, leadership, and technology trends you should be thinking about for right now and for the future. A quick note, this event is being recorded and will be placed on the Presidio.com website in our video library. If you have any further questions following this conversation or requests, please reach out to us at inquiries@presidio.com or visit our website. You know, one of the consistent themes that we've heard in our prior C-suite discussions have been how the COVID crisis is accelerating the move from legacy infrastructures to a hybrid multi-cloud platform built upon agile, secure infrastructures. The companies that were able to adapt to work at home or highly distributed work at home models have typically been those that were further along the digital transformation curve. They had the agility, the zero-touch provisioning models, security, and portable workload foundation that enabled them to very quickly make the move and maintain high levels of productivity. Today, we're going to talk about what this new world is going to look like for companies, how you get there, and what the best practices are for CIOs to successfully manage the transition. We're going to do that with our special guest, Dheeraj Pandey, founder, chairman, and CEO of Nutanix. Dheeraj has a wealth of experience working at high-growth enterprise software companies. Prior to founding Nutanix, he was a VP of engineering at Aster Data, where he helped develop the product and build out its engineering team from the ground up. At Oracle, he managed the storage engine group of the Oracle database Exadata and co-authored numerous patents in the area of distributed databases. Dheeraj is on the board of directors of Adobe and has been recognized with a number of prestigious awards, including Dell's Founders 50 and the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award for Silicon Valley. Dheeraj, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you to the audience for their curiosity and their intrigue. I hope all of you are safe and healthy.
So, you know, just doing your intro, right? You can summarize it in that you're an inventor, you're a CEO of a publicly listed company, you are a entrepreneur, and you're an innovator, right? The hyper convergence space, right? Nutanix was, first and foremost in that space and created, to a large extent, the technology and the methodologies and the opportunity, for clients to move in a big way into hyperconvergence. Tell me a little bit about how you get from Oracle and Aster Data to Nutanix, to the founding and starting of Nutanix.
Thank you. I feel humbled and honored that you recognized some of the things that I've done. And a lot of it is because of the people around me as well. I think it's the team that has made me who I am and the company where it is. But if you take a step back 20 years, I dropped out of my PhD program at University of Texas, Austin 22 years ago. I've spent half my life in India, half my life in the US. In fact, I took my first flight in my life at the age of 22. I'd never flown, before that. So it was quite an experience coming here. And then I went to intern at Oracle in summer of 98, which is where I'm like, wow, this is the height of the bubble, the internet bubble. I'm like, I need to really time my entrance into the industry. So I went back to my university, where I was pursuing my PhD. And I went on a leave of absence. I said, I'm going to come and finish my PhD later. And I joined a company called Trilogy Software in Austin, Texas. And about a year and a half later, I literally drove from Texas to California to join a startup, which was building clustered file servers, trying to compete with NetApp using commodity servers and commodity networks. And that was the beginning of my commodity journey. Like, how do you really build software and commodity hardware? And from there, for 3 years, during the bubble burst and obviously the recession that happened, I learned a lot about, what to do, how to build things, and what not to do as well. I went to Oracle, built databases, Oracle RAC, Oracle Exadata, a lot of database and data management skills, and tons of patents on databases and storage. And then in 2007, I joined another startup, like the 11th, 12th guy, trying to build a data warehouse, another distributed database on commodities servers and commodity networks. I mean, in today's world, in the world of cloud, you look at Snowflake and say, oh, that's a database and a data warehouse product. 12 years ago, we were trying to do that with commodity servers when there was no cloud. So again, learned a lot about distributed systems, data management and so on. And in 2009, right during the recession, very similar to what we are seeing today, I think there was this fire in the belly to do something on your own. And this is the time when Sequoia had come up with this deck on rest in peace, good times. And I think a lot of very inventive, creative people, they had a fire in the belly to say, look, we need to take control of our destiny. And that's what we did. I think three of us, we quit. We knew each other from before. We quit our jobs. And in the height of the recession, we seeded in September of 2009. The company, again, the focus was, how do you build distributed systems on commodity servers, commodity networks? And, virtualization was basically picking up, out of test and dev environments into more production workloads. And the consumer cloud was actually picking up quite a bit. And the architecture of consumer cloud was commodity servers and commodity networks. So I think the initial bet was, let's bring this idea of commodity servers and commodity networks to virtualization and VMware. And the first 5-6 years, we said we're going to re-architect the VMware environment with a new thinking, a new methodology. But from all the lessons we've learned in the last 10 years of our career, which is how do you really deal with scale-out environments and commodity servers, commodity networks. And then, over time, there's a lot of learnings from Apple and, simplicity and elegance. And a lot of my learnings came from being a very intentful user of Apple, actually, Apple product. And the word empathy came from that, the way we do customer service, a lot of, focus on net promoter score. A lot of that actually came from being an Apple user. And we kept asking this question, what would Apple do rather than what would an enterprise software company do? And I think over time, we just kept adding more and more to it, to the point where we started to draw analogies between music and the iPhone, photography and the iPhone, GPS and the iPhone, because everything around us basically became pure software and ran on a converged platform called iOS and Android. So we try to apply a lot of those metaphors to data center and infrastructure. And now we've been here 10 years. And when we look to the next 10 years of what we would be as a software company on the public cloud, again, our friend is commodity servers and commodity networks. So in many ways, I feel like the clock has turned full circle. Our embrace of common architecture, a standardized operating system running anywhere and everywhere is a very powerful one.
Now, it certainly is. You talked about the combination of software and commodity hardware. Now, when you started the business, because we've been a partner a long time with you guys and had some great success with clients, you sold an appliance. So you were a hardware and a software company. You were selling the Nutanix appliance. Now, was that the intention at the outset, or was it a strategy so that you could get your software delivered and get it customer acceptance so that you could then get the attention of the commodity compute platform providers?
Yeah, great question, Bob. I think initially we were at odds with many of these server vendors because they had a big storage play. And they would not have embraced this architecture as well, simply because it would cannibalize their existing, cash cow, which was the storage business. I think the first company that actually was coming forward was Dell, and we'll talk more about that separately. But we also had to bring the white box mentality to the enterprise. And none of these white box vendors had a front office to, support and break fix and parts depots. And so we had to really work the whole body of enterprise support and say that, look, we are here to support the white box. And that's what the cloud companies do. I mean, for them, it's all about white boxes, actually, So I think we really embrace the mundane of supporting and being the front office for hardware. And that's what created this groundswell for this architecture. And people today love us for just that one thing, the fact that we are a single stop shop for all things hardware and software, even though we don't recognize hardware in our books anymore. And even though we have our software run on Dell servers and HP servers and Lenovo servers and Fujitsu and so on, I think people love to come to us because we go and look at not just their hardware issues, but a lot of the low-level details of what it means to operate a cloud. I mean, cloud is really about operations and commerce, and the back office of cloud is all about automation, patching, all the things that the operators worry about on an everyday basis that the public cloud has automated. It's still not there yet. So we did a lot of that for the first 4, 5, 6 years. And then along the way, Dell was getting curious about this. And this is before the EMC acquisition. And they knocked at the door and they kind of convinced us to say, why don't we actually let loose of the soul and actually be in sort of Dell's body, which is their servers. And we ended up doing that, which effectively made us compete with ourselves because here there was another appliance form factor that you could buy from Dell. And then every year we added more. We added Lenovo, then we added Cisco and HP support. Finally, we ended up signing up HP as an OEM partner. So I think it's been a journey of 5, 6 years. And then in 2018, we said, you know what, let's expose our software value to Wall Street as well. And everybody was surprised that 75% of the value was software, actually. So that was the beginning of preparing for cloud, because we didn't want to have an on-prem business and a separate cloud business. We said, look, we need to have extremely portable licenses where our sellers don't take sides on where the software runs. And we knew that lift and shift is going to be hard. It's really, really hard. So if we can actually mimic and recreate the on-prem environment in the public cloud, and we can make things one click, then people need portable licenses. And that's where subscription transition started. So in the last 10 years, we've not just innovated on technology, but we've really sweated it with respect to business model transition, because the next 10 years is all about hybrid and all about portability.
Yeah, so we were talking a little bit about those transitions the other day. And you and I are either fortunately or unfortunately, we're old enough to remember a lot of the different transitions in this industry, and we go back to the 80s and the early 90s with the move from mainframes and minis to client server environment, and then the move into the internet world, if you will, and now this move to a hybrid multi-cloud world, which what we've been talking a lot about on these calls that we've been having with CEOs like you is that was the ultimate destination for most, if not all, of our clients, right? To move into a multi-cloud world, to transition, the legacy architecture and the legacy applications to a multi-cloud environment where it's agile, secure, on-demand, manageable, et cetera, everything that you've spoken about. But COVID has actually really accelerated that based upon the success that we've seen with clients that were further along that curve and their ability to quickly move to different working models, right? At-home working models that were secure, that were productive, that had the performance that they wanted, et cetera. So I know you've thought a lot about this too. You talked the other day about the big bets against IBM in the 90s and et cetera. Can you maybe talk about how this transition that we're in right now, that you guys are at the forefront of, is either different or similar to some of those transitions we've seen in the last 30 years around compute platforms and service delivery models?
It's a great question, Bob. As you and I were talking about this the other day about how disruptions happen. When in the early 90s, there were very large IBM partners who had too much to lose to give up on their IBM business, and they clung on to the mainframe mentality when the world was really moving to dispersed computing. And there were companies like Presidio that arose out of that disruption. They said, look, we're going to embrace the new. And the new world was about smaller form factors, appliances. The new world was about Ethernet. The new world was about IP. And it was about Wintel, Windows and Intel. And I think that concept of dispersing computing, consuming something smaller has just stuck on with us, from mainframe to Unix, to Wintel, which is Intel plus Windows, to Linux and Intel, to virtual machines, to now we're talking about containers and serverless. And also there's the other axis of time. We used to buy things for 10 years, and then we started buying things for 5 years and 3 years. And now in the public cloud, people want to rent things for hours and months. So in many ways, on both these axes, one is around the size, the other one around time. People want to consume things that are smaller because it provides them option value for the future. They can change their mind if they felt like. And I think that's the power of the cloud, and this is the reason why we really moved to the subscription model, because in this world of COVID, people really want to try out smaller things, and this happened with virtualization 12 years ago. Virtualization was a test and dev play, and people said, look, I don't have the budget to buy more servers. What do? I want to spin up more projects, do more pilots, and people just embraced virtualization and made it production ready for database workloads and Exchange workloads and Citrix workloads and things like that. So I think in this current environment, future of work, future of healthcare, future of education, I think we are going to see a ton of disruption where people really want to take this opportunity of flat budgets or shrinking budgets, of the fact that operators cannot even go to a data center and really, hug their hardware to say, look, I need to take a step back and think hard about, zero touch administration operations. So I feel like there's a great opportunity for companies like Presidio and Nutanix to come together and not just use multi-cloud as a buzzword, but to really go concretely land it with a great ROI within 3 to 6 months, and deliver things that otherwise would get done in 3 years, because speed is the name of the game.
Yeah. So when you think about your client base, I'm sure there's been a lot of lessons learned where you've seen clients really dive in and accelerate their investment around these platforms, utilizing Nutanix. What are some of for the CIOs on the call? What are some of perhaps the key lessons learned that you've noticed from these interactions when folks really have successful transitions? What is it that the CIO has done or thought about that's made it so successful?
Yeah, just like with the camera, if you think of the camera app, initially it was laughable to use a camera on a phone. People are like, why would I not use my DSLR, the Nikon, the Canon, and so on? And every year, photography started to move more and more towards the iPhone and the Android devices, that we have. And at the same time, we didn't want to compromise on quality. So I think Apple's of the world doubled down on now we buy a camera, we buy a phone because of a camera. Similarly, I think what has happened in our world is that this notion of software defined, which was fashionable to begin with, it needed reliability and high availability and to be extremely secure. So we said, look, we are here with a new architecture, but the thing that we really will talk the most about is reliability. That's the one thing that nobody wants to compromise on. People said, in the past that you never fired for buying an IBM. It's because they used to be reliable systems. They would never go down. And I think we want to make sure that we actually help a lot of these, CIOs and even VPs of infrastructure and cloud architects to think about when they're embracing something like Nutanix. Again, go back to our net promoter score of 90. It's about reliable customer support. And that cannot happen if you have unreliable products, actually. So the most important thing in all of this has been us going and talking about trust. Like, how do you really embrace something new? And we have seen that. We actually talk about this every quarter with Wall Street as well, about repeat business, which actually is a great way to build trust. You start small, you don't try to boil the ocean, which is really the way cloud is consumed as well. And then over time, customers actually build their trust with you, actually. And that's been the biggest thing for us, more than technology, more than anything else, is can we deliver on what we promised? Because this idea of hyperconvergence, It's digital infrastructure. Really, it's about software running on commodity servers. But then you have data center services, developer services, desktop services. All these things have to be extremely reliable. And for the grassroots, I think the most important thing is, did we give their weekends back? Again, simplicity and elegance and not having to worry about, waterfall planning for upgrades and taking 9 months to do all this stuff. Like, can we do upgrades at 3 p.m. on a Thursday when everything is up and running? Because cloud is really about continuous innovation and continuous consumption. The things that CIOs lose their jobs on is security and lack of patching and not having to deal with zero-day vulnerabilities and things of that nature. And these are mundane things that software can imminently automate. And those are the kind of things that we've done so well.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. When we announced that you were going to be joining us, we open up for registration and folks can put in questions for us to ask you. And we have one that I think is great because I think it also plays into where you're going with the business. We talk about cloud, we talk about edge computing, and your relationships with the with the hyperscalers. So the question from one of our existing clients, collectively together here now, they've been a Nutanix client and they're committed to Nutanix for at least the next 5 years. As more servers and applications are moving away from private cloud, what is the way forward with Nutanix to allow customers to fully move their data center from on-prem to cloud? Since we're a law firm, confidentiality and security are a major concern for us. So I think that plays into a lot of what we're talking about in terms of your vision on where this is going.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And I kind of learned from history. History, as somebody said the other day, doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And that's a really important way to think about it. So 20 years ago, when virtualization came into existence, I think the biggest promise of virtualization was no change to the app and no change to the operating system, the guest operating system, Microsoft or Linux. And that was powerful. In many ways, similar skill sets. The Microsoft admins were able to internalize and embrace the VMware admin tools. Management was key. Security was key. And it made it look and feel the same way the System Center was with Microsoft is what vCenter was with VMware, actually. But the key thing was you don't have to reskill everybody. Take a look back at this whole fiasco of 737 MAX. I think every airline company wanted to make sure that they didn't have to reskill their pilots. And reskilling is hard. So the important thing here is, can you build a bridge with the old world where you have millions of IT operators who are used to doing it in a certain way? Can you bring that to the new world? And that lift and shift is going to be core, where without you have to refactor applications and redo your operating systems and so on. And this is the reason why open source virtualization actually didn't take off, because it made too many assumptions about having to go change the incumbency and having to do para-virtualization when you could really emulate everything. So the name of the game in this lift and shift will be emulation. Can you emulate everything that you used to do on-prem, the way you used to do EMC and NetApp and Cisco and VMware and Nutanix, all this stuff? Can you bring it to the new world? And our power and value will be, all we need is commodity servers and commodity networks, which is why I come back to this thing that the world is turned full circle. And the public cloud players also are impatient about lift and shift. It's too much work. What would it take to refactor the app is 3 to 5 years, and then finally system integrators would come, and if things fail, they'll blame the cloud operators as opposed to why did we even end up refactoring it? So our offer to our customers is, can we help build a true multi-cloud single pane of glass where you have locations, but we make have a look and feel that is common and standardized, actually. And along the way, we'll actually learn from the cloud, but the cloud also has to learn from on-prem. There's so many things in security models and data management models and compute models and operating models. When do you do upgrades? When do you not do upgrades? There's you're trying to run an application of a healthcare provider, you have to be extremely cognizant of their uptime, downtime scenarios, and so on. So I think that's the opportunity for us, that we bring a new operating model without having to disrupt the businesses themselves. And lift and shift is a great use case for us. We are working really closely with both AWS and Azure on making sure we hyper converge the experience, because you can do convergence in many ways. If you go back in time, you remember vBlocks and FlexPods, they were doing convergence as well. But it was really, at least to me, was actually a convergence 1.0, which was about putting things in a rack and having a single 1-800 number support, when it really had to be software running on commodity servers. And that's why hyperconvergence came, and really converged infrastructure faded away, because it was not simple enough. It wasn't converged enough, and it wasn't really a cloud-like architecture. So I think that to us is a big opportunity, where we make the public cloud bare metal, because it's bare metal offering on the public cloud, look like it's commodity servers and commodity networks.
So the vision you paint, really starts to lay out the groundwork or the foundation for that concept that you and I were talking about the other day. We were talking about how the role of a CIO changes. And we were talking about, we have a lot of discussion with our clients about how they are becoming a portfolio manager, where their assets are those workloads, right? Or that data set. And figuring out where you're going to get the best return, whether it's an economic return, performance, compliance, security, data sovereignty, or any of a number of other return areas. Because as as workloads mature and as data sets mature, they're utilized in different ways, or different loads are going on them, and they change. Where you're going to get that best return. And now we're not quite there yet, but we're almost there in that environment where folks can really dynamically manage their portfolio of workloads and maximize the return to the business along 5 or 6 very critical axes. And I know you had some real thoughts about how the role of the CIO and how the role of IT is going to continue to change and evolve as well.
Yeah. I think at some level, as you said, it's a great analogy, and I hadn't heard it before until I heard you speak about it, as how there's a bell curve of investments, and you look at the way Wall Street portfolio managers manage money, is really looking at investment classes. And in each of these investment classes, they either go deep into individual stocks, or they have ETFs and they just follow S&P, or they buy into some of these ETFs that actually are more like a fabric that virtualizes everything. It's like virtualization in many ways, actually. And then they have different kinds of investment classes. There's emerging economies, there's commodities, there's metal, there is growth, there's value. And it's very similar with CIOs too, because they need to look at this as a bell curve of investments. And at the same time, knowing how the baton will pass from the old to the new is all about transitions, it's migration. And I think that's where we shine, actually, because we've done a really good job of, embracing the mundane to say, what does it mean to take a very old app? I mean, right now, you probably will know one of our customers, I think it's Whirlpool, if I'm not mistaken, that is running this next generation software hyperconvergence on IBM Power Series, and they want to be able to do things with AIX and all that. So being able to really carry forward this idea of can we bring the mundane along, the legacy application along, is very powerful. And being able to do this with one-click automation and delight that really developers are used to, or at least are asking for, is going to be the core of this transformation, actually. Yeah. So I think us, when we think of it as a public cloud, private cloud, edge, having that single pane of glass that's extremely simple to use, is very secure, because security is the key, sort of pillars of this transformation. We have to be very careful about reliability, security, and simplicity.
Yeah. So the client you mentioned, a major appliance manufacturer. Yeah, they were locked in to an IBM managed services contract with IBM hardware, and it just very, very expensive and very, very lethargic or monolithic, if you will. So it was very hard for them to implement the type of change that they wanted to and get the type of agility they wanted to in the business. And the solution that we put together with Nutanix, that had a less than 12-month ROI, right, on total cost of ownership basis. And when you think about any type of recession, whether it's something like we saw in '08, or this one that's wrapped around healthcare and societal implications and et cetera, the economic impact, clients are looking for solutions that can drive positive ROI, typically in less than a 12-month time period, right? They want to at least do it within their fiscal year. And what we've been able to do together with you guys is create solutions time and time again that drives a real positive ROI in a real short frame period of time. So very positive things that clients should look for, when you're thinking about, well, how do I manage OpEx? Right? How do I manage capital? Right? How do I manage all through, from a financial standpoint, through a crisis and through a recession? So that was a great success for both of us. A wonderful job.
At some level, in the past, we have actually looked at professional services as a way to actually go add value to our customers, joint customers. In many ways, you are saying, I'm willing to actually disrupt myself and do things even faster, because if we do it right by the customer, we'll do even more things for our customers together. So there are legacy channel partners who are probably trying to embrace complexity because they see money there. But if you embrace simplicity, you end up doing more higher value things, and that's the place where customers actually believe value add happens, really.
Yeah, and that is part of our mission, if you will. It's to take that complexity and make it simple for people. And we're big believers in the old phrase, cannibalize yourself as well. You mentioned it a little bit earlier, right? If you don't, someone else is going to do that, to you. So we're more than happy to help clients accelerate, their journey from more traditional models to more modern models. I do want to shift gears a little bit because I know you talked a lot about in the past your nirvana, your true north, your principles and the culture that you wanted to build around Nutanix, and it sounds like that was very much part of the strategy and the business plan. It was not just the technology and the financial and the go-to-market models, but you spent a lot of time thinking about the culture that you wanted as the foundation for Nutanix. Can you tell us a little bit about your principles? I know you've got them laid out fairly articulately.
It's very near and dear to me, and again, it goes back to the word empathy. How do you really organize people and look at employees as customers? Is at the core of our thinking. I think, if you think about it, like customers, they're giving their all to us. They have one job and they're building careers with us. So we have a degree of responsibility that is extremely unique, and it's a big burden. So if we don't tie everybody together through culture, then we're just building some tech. So I think, about a couple of years ago, we figured we need to really codify everything that we have been over a decade. And that's when these 12 culture principles came together. I invoke on an everyday basis, and a lot to help resolve conflicts, because, the idea of culture principles was, how do leaders become invisible and leadership become visible? You don't want leaders to be in every room to help resolve conflicts or help make decisions. So if you can have it in every meeting room where you have a wallpaper or some of these singular principles really enunciated, then all of a sudden leaders become invisible while leadership becomes visible. It's like the way we talk about the government should become invisible and governance should become visible, actually. It's very similar. So we had to really democratize this. And there's some of my favorites. I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek. His book, Start With Why. So I think our culture principles, the first one is we start with why. And in fact, there's a sequence of whys you can use to really get to the core of the problem rather than focusing a lot on the what or the how. The other one is design is everything. which again is about empathy, and it's about, how do you really think of consumer inspired products? What does it mean to really make it so simple that you bring the weekends back to the operators? And these are easier to say words, but really hard to get right. I mean, today we have a multi-product portfolio. As I mentioned before, HCI is digital infrastructure, but we have data center products and filers and object storage and networks and security. We have, developer products and containers and database as a service, and we have desktop products. How do you integrate it all together? Because if we didn't integrate with design, then we don't deserve to be actually selling multiple products. And customers are okay to buy best of breed and integrate it on their own. But if we actually do a great job of integration, then your SEs also find it delightful. And when Presidio's SEs find it delightful is when the customers get delivered something that's delightful. So design at the core of what we do is everything. Even what we're doing with the hyperscalers right now, I mean, to us, it's not about being the first, it's about being the best. So the way we are doing this hyperconvergence of our software into the cloud bare metal is all about the customer's billing, the customer's accounts, the customer's network, so they don't feel like they're in yet another extraneous environment. One of my other cultural principles that I really am fond of is it's called get comfortable being uncomfortable. And there is a paradox in those four words. The more I learn about leadership, the more I realize that it's really about balancing paradoxes. It's like, I'm sure you do the same, being the CEO of such a large company that's constantly disrupting itself. How do you really balance opposites in your head? Maybe you should talk about some of that too. Like, how do you really do a tightrope walk? And talk about your, getting comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah. So we call that, calling our baby ugly. So it's constantly looking at the business, looking at the solutions that we're delivering, looking at where the market's going, and understanding how we can do better. And that goes through every portion of the business. The processes, the systems, everything that you're wrapping around it. It's a constant evaluation, hopefully with as much objective data as possible, to understand. Okay, well, where's the baby ugly, right? What do we need to fix? Now, along with that, you want to make sure that everybody's, we're celebrating successes, and that nature. But it does start with having a culture and an environment where you can have respectful, passionate debate, understanding that everybody's on the same team, right? Very, very team oriented. We all have the same objectives, and we're all passionate, and we want to know the different viewpoints. We want to understand the entire picture, so that when we make a decision, we all can move forward, understanding what all the elements were that were involved in this. And at a management level, that probably happens a lot in probably a lot of companies. The step that we try to take, and I can't say we're always perfect in it, is part of being more transparent in communication down to the field, right? Make sure everybody knows why we're going in the direction we're going to, right? It's not only giving them the vision, it's giving them the reason. We talk a lot about leadership, and we say, it's you want to talk about the what and the why, but maybe not the how, right? You're gonna have your teams figure out the how. So this is what we want to do. This is why we want to do it, right? And now you folks, you're closer to the customer, you're closer to the action, you're closer to the technology, right? You're closer to the systems. Tell us how we're going to accomplish that. And in our mind, the more you can push out that critical how and that critical decision making closer to the field, whether it's your customers or your technology partners, or even the staff, then the more responsive you can be. And I think the better data that you're going to get.
Because it kind of brings out a lot of our other culture principles. Like one of them is hire often and hire diverse. And it's not just about gender diversity, it's thought diversity, ideas coming from everybody. Again, back to conflict resolution, the principles should help you even enunciate. Like like one of ours that we have copied from Amazon is have backbone, disagree but commit. I think, it's really important because, you want people to have the backbone to push back, but eventually you cannot be passive aggressive about things actually. And the third one, which is, as you said, the how do you leave the how to the field, is celebrate autonomy, because people, especially people who are knowledge workers, they come to work not just for a paycheck, but also for autonomy actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people want to author as well. Not everybody wants to be a character in the book, right? Mm-hmm. People want to have a sense of authorship, and you get the best results, and I think you get the best enjoyment. We talk about being part of a team, right? What you're understanding your role, but being able to adapt and perform the way that you see fit, and that's part of teamwork. That's part of self-awareness, which is a big thing for us as well. It kind of goes to what we call, well, we didn't make it up, but it's the no asshole rule, which is our team has heard me talk about this book forever. But it does talk about how, somebody who is not maybe a stellar performer from a productivity standpoint, if they cause a lot of collateral damage in the business, they're probably not worth it. But when you start to drill down, it's really about, well, everybody's going to have some elements of being a jerk. Right. And everybody's going to exhibit that at some point in time. But do you have enough self-awareness to understand, one, where you do get out of shape, two, things you do well and things you don't do well. Right. Mm-hmm. And how do you work with people so that you can get the best out of yourself and you can get the best out of them? And that concept is one that we work on a lot. I've had to reread the book a couple of times. I got to make sure I stay on the straight and narrow, but it's a concept that we do believe in pretty strongly.
Beautiful. I mean, again, technology can play a big role in culture as well. And this goes back to the design issue. We believe that a lot of IT operators want to become DevOps people, and many of them, they never wrote code, but they would like to learn how to write code. So even the way, Bob, we have designed our orchestration automation tools, where we bring automation to the have-not, with very simple drag and drop visual automation, and then having them learn a little bit of Python and so on. So the product does enough, but then the human also does enough to learn to become a DevOps person. All that's part of the culture, because in this whole thing, all they need to do is to not try to become a developer or a DevOps person overnight. But again, back to one of the culture principles we have is think big, but start small. Like, can you start on a small footing where every day you're learning a little bit more about what DevOps really means?
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I've seen you talk about your culture in the past, and it's pretty compelling. So thank you for sharing that with us. We've got a couple more minutes left, and we haven't spoken about the elephant in the room to a large extent. But briefly, when you think about COVID-19, how has that changed Nutanix today, and how do you think it changes your business and or what your strategy is going forward?
This is to me probably a bigger disruption and an opportunity for innovation than the internet. I mean, if you think of the internet, it actually eventually went to 7 billion people, but took a long time. It needed vehicles like 2G, 3G, 4G, and mobile and all the stuff to even get to 7 billion people. And it took 20 years from its beginnings in Netscape browser in 1993 to where it actually is today after 27 years. COVID is here with 7+ billion people. It's probably more impactful than anything we've ever seen. And in a future of work, there's probably a couple of billion professionals who are affected by this, work from home, and what does it mean? How do you bring the enterprise to office environment to the home? I mean, think of patients. I mean, healthcare, 7 billion users of healthcare who are affected by this. Many of them are unable to go back to even get non-COVID, healthcare figured out, like, heart patients and diabetes patients and, other Surgeries have completely stopped. And finally, education. I think, there's probably a couple of billion children and college-going students who've been affected by this. So it's bigger than the internet. And it's come in like two to 3 months, not like 2 to 3 decades. But at the same time, I think the human spirit is indomitable. And it's figured out a way to get out of these kind of things in the past as well. I believe we'll get out of this provided we actually think different. One of the hallmarks of leaders, and the more I read, is like they love the discomfort zone. They want to embrace the discomfort of this COVID thing. And personally, I think I really am, reveling at it. Like, this is the time to do things that we've been postponed, or maybe because you get complacent. And look, I mean, our company in the last 10 years has become, more than 6,000 employees. And now we talk about a couple of $1 billion of run rate, but all that stuff makes you feel too big and makes you complacent. When you can do things that make you look like a startup again. So somebody said from our employee base recently, it's very rare that a company gets to be a startup twice. So I'm just acting like a startup, where we have to say, yeah, and it's a beautiful imagery. It's a beautiful imagery, because then you're like, well, there's nothing to lose, everything to gain. We will take tough decisions. I mean, and at the same time, these decisions have to be empathic. Like recently we said, okay, we'll take a week off every quarter for two quarters. It's like 2 weeks of furlough. And we said it's harder to do this across the world. We have employees in 60 countries. But we had to apply some frameworks of decision making, because you can't arbitrarily make decisions like that. So one of the frameworks was, and Jeff Bezos from Amazon talks about this, type 1 versus type 2 decisions. Type 2 decisions are reversible. You can make them all day long, and it doesn't really have to cost you much. And a furlough in that sense is a type 2 decision for us, and then this concept of the most good. How do you apply this principle of the most good, which is again a Simon Sinek principle? Better to have all of us share a little bit of the pain rather than some of have to share all the pain, actually. So you apply some of these frameworks during this time, and yet as you run a business, you have to think about what good looks like, what disruption means. So I'm actually applying a lot of these principles to go do things for the greater good this coming decade, actually. And not the least of which is how to become even more efficient, and how do you think of this multi-cloud transition, and how do you integrate the products? Because now is the time where individual developers who were like, all myopic about their own product are also thinking about paying the dues of the community, which is like, let's integrate them, folks. We need to actually be part of this singular experience, because customers don't buy things. They want to buy an experience. So go pay the taxes on integration. Go make it look like it's one company's products as opposed to individual products, actually. So those are the kind of things that I'm actually really putting a lot of hard work on during this time of COVID.
Yeah, you learn the most when you're the most uncomfortable. And we talk about that. Yeah. And when you're comfortable and or complacent, you're not going to learn a whole heck of a lot.
And maybe you recount like what you went through when you were as a much younger company when the internet bust happened. And obviously you were very high on networking and doing things right with Cisco. And obviously there was a painful moment of those 2-3 years, like the lessons that you learned along the way.
Yeah, well, diversification was one of them, right? Diversification from a technology standpoint. I think you were right when Presidio started, and way back then, very much a networking and a collaboration business only. And you started to see the diversification into a deeper set of lifecycle services, a deeper set of managed services, then across the infrastructure, right, around compute and storage and security. And so now, we're in a space now where, we believe we've got a really comprehensive set of solutions around an entire agile, secure infrastructure platform for our client, and moving them from traditional to this multi-cloud environment with the right set of professional services at the right time, and the type of managed services that can help them optimize and continue to grow out the platform. So those are, I think that was probably the biggest learning for us back then. Now it's somewhat different in that, much like we were looking at temporary solutions for temporary problems, right? Not a permanent solution for, a person, for what we all expect to be a temporary solution or a temporary problem. Now, we don't know how long this problem is going to last. We don't have the visibility, yet. I don't know if anybody does. They talk about V-shaped curves and U-shaped curves and, L-shaped recoveries and all sorts of things. So getting that visibility is still difficult. But then along your concept, those that had the broader shoulders, if you will, in the company, those that could afford to shoulder more of the load are shouldering more of the load, right? And that, and the rest of the employee base, as you look across it, there are folks that are not in the same type of position to shoulder the same amount. And we want to make sure that those folks would be asked to do the least amount, but it's all in support of the greater good, for the entire organization, because this is no time for somebody to be, out of work. Jobs are scarce, and we don't want to put anybody in that position. Number one. Number two, just from a business standpoint, this recovery is going to happen. And when it happens, there's a lot of pent up demand and a lot of clients who said, I need to be in a different space with my IT than I was in when I went into that. It may happen again without a vaccine. There may be some other type of disruption, but I can't be in this situation again. We do about 10 to 11,000 projects a year. We had no project cancellations as we moved into this, but we had about 300 projects that were delayed. About 100 of those have already restarted. So that's the other thing you look at is, all right, if people start restarting projects and start starting new projects all at the same time, the real value that Presidio brings are the people that we've got. And it's not just the engineers and the consultants and the architects and the salespeople. It's all the people that support the functioning of the business that have been working so well, from home in this remote worker environment, and has kept the business really productive, that need to be here. And we want to make sure that, we've got, all the ammunition we need, to support our customers as they really start to ramp up when we get to the end of this. And we're going to do it with great partners like you.
I'm looking forward. And the moment you said you diversified, I'm like, wow, the time when EMC was also coming out of this Data General acquisition, getting outside of Unix into virtualization is the time when you picked up EMC, which I think was a great partnership over more than 2 decades. We look forward to earning our keep as a partner with you.
And we look forward to continuing to do some great solutions with you guys. It's been a pleasure today. Thank you, Dheeraj.
Thank you, Bob. And thank you to our audience. I think it's the very fact that you spent an hour with us means a lot.
I'll see you again soon, hopefully in person.
Likewise. Stay safe and stay healthy.
I want to thank Dheeraj Pandey for joining us today. In his long technology career, he's been an inventor, he's been an innovator, an entrepreneur, and a public company CEO. And it was great to hear his thoughts on how you disrupt yourself, his 12 cultural tenets, and building technology solutions for a multi-cloud world. As previously mentioned, a recording of this event will be accessible on the Presidio.com website in our video library. And if you want to talk with us further about any of the topics we addressed today, please send us an email at inquiries@presidio.com. In 2 weeks on June 3rd at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, we will continue this series with a conversation with Nikesh Arora, the chairman and CEO of Palo Alto Networks. To register, please visit Presidio.com and check back with us for future speakers. Have a great day, everyone.